And, another thing that's really important is that, the stereotypes that we create for ourselves and for others about what is spiritual and what is a enlightenment, we need to really lay off on that a little bit. We need to understand it. And actually, it's pretty funny, sometimes silly. I've seen, like, when I'm some of the best comedians I've ever met in my life were Buddhist monks. So they had a great time in order to make me look at my life and go, okay, that's where I would usually, I remember, I don't know if I've told you. So in changing this idea, right? Because again, with discernment, we're being discerning, we're changing our perspective. And as I was talking about cognitive behavioral therapy, the activating event to behavior, the reaction to behavior, and the consequence. And it's interesting because when all of us love to complain, and that we usually, people like to have people surround themselves. That's why all the bars are full, people to complain with, have no consequence to your life. You can just throw whatever you want at them, and people are just, oh yeah, I remember going to Tsukumoto Sensei and complaining about life or something, and he looked at me, he said, Kanjin, that's wonderful. So great news. And I'm like, well, that's not the reaction I was looking for. I was looking for the idea, oh, I'm so sorry for you, but he said, no, it's a wonderful opportunity. I'm so happy. What a treasure this will be for you. It's like the mud, getting stuck in the mud type thing. That's why the joking and kidding that we do in Buddhism is pretty important. It's poignant, even though it's um, Buddhists are pretty funny actually. So I think so, and that's just my opinion. But let's move on. I'm just going to talk a little bit about this. Is since you have the book, Derek, page 1703, cultivating proper contemplation. Is it recording on? Okay,
yes,
yes. Okay.
have the recording.
If you are to cultivate the study of cessation and contemplation, you should carefully consider the contents of this chapter from beginning to end. Cultivation of cessation and contemplation involves two types. First, cultivate while sitting in meditation, and second, to respond to objects as conditions arise. Do you know what that means?
First
What
to
do you think?
cultivate while sitting in meditation, and second to
Yep.
respond to. Yeah, so uh I mean, kind of as it says, so when you're sitting in your meditation practice, eyes closed, letting your mind sort of get into that meditative state, where you're sort of just not zoning out into meditation, but
One-pointedness.
one pointedness. Yeah, and the second, respond to objects and conditions as they arise. So being forced to, you're giving something unexpected, or a condition or some sort of situation or condition that has arisen, and you have to in real time contemplate and um yeah.
So the way this is written in Chinese is interesting because it tells you how to use the sentence. Chinese doesn't go like this in a straight line, it bounces around. So when you read it, actually they have to put little devices next to it to tell you how to read it. So it's not one character after another, it bounces back and forth, like in poetry. So if you read that, the way that it's written says, if you are to cultivate and study cessation contemplation, okay, that's the first double example you have: cessation contemplation, stopping and seeing, okay. Then you look at what it's saying. You should carefully consider, involves two types. Then what it's saying is that those are the two types. So it goes back to contemplation, cessation and contemplation, stopping and seeing. So while sitting in meditation, that is stopping. And then when having contemplation, stopping and seeing, or cessation and contemplation, is to respond to objects as they arise, to see it as it is, jiso. So when we're sitting in meditation, we use the daimoku as the object to cessation or stopping, as with your exhale. And there's a lot of yogic science behind why it's on the exhale and not on the inhale. Exhale, as we're exhaling out, we're using Nam-myoho Horen Geikyo in our mind as the focal point to stop, to cease. Then as we bring it in, this is what he says is the contemplation. That is to respond to the objects as they arise. We see reality as it is. So we're doing two things. We're stopping. And then when we're stopping, what it means is that we're opening and allowing us to have that perception. It's changing our perception. That's dhyana. So we're experiencing both. We're training ourselves in that way. Sitting, number one. First is to cultivate cessation and contemplation while sitting. The path can be learned with any four types of activity: going, dwelling, sitting, and laying down. These are the types of meditation. That's why today, didn't we do that today where we stood up? Right? There's also walking meditation and running meditation. That that's what the monk I was talking about on Mount Hiei, he did for 1,000 days. That's the walking and running meditation. Interesting. But sitting in the dhyanic meditation is the most superior condition because it lends it, because we can quiet everything. Therefore, I will first clarify cessation and contemplation in the terms of sitting. That's why that's the most important. So that's what we're going to study today. The cultivation of cessation and contemplation to counteract and destroy the coarse agitations of the beginner's mind. What are coarse agitations? Does anyone have a coarse agitation in their mind right now? Besides my voice. Coarse agitation means whatever disrupts us. An agitation, like agitating, like you know how they you remember those rock tumblers that would make gems or something when you're a kid?
Yes, yeah.
That's a kind of agitation. Or what I think sifting for gold is a kind of agitation where it reveals something, right?
Exactly.
So coarse agitation is whatever disturbs the mind. Two, the cultivation of cessation and contemplation to control and heal the diseases of overly depressed or excited thought. So this goes back, this is an important part that a lot of times Buddhism doesn't pay attention to. When they talk about diseases, the character for this is actually evil, which means actually even demon. The character for demon also means like illness. So we always know about the physical illness, right? Because we experience that, and even maybe mental. But if we experience mental, usually we're not the ones, we're not aware of it. It has to be diagnosed or shown by someone else. But that means that our thoughts, those agitated thoughts, are the causation for illness and sickness in whatever context as that is. And sickness and illness means when we're not in this state of equilibrium, we are ill or sick. And that actually, they believe, is a cause of disease. If we can want to look at it in modern terms, stress is part of life, but then there are good stressors and bad stressors, right? And as they see, even with the development, and I've seen this personally with people with, dealing with terminal illnesses or illnesses, great illnesses such as cancer, you can see how it can be precipitated. That's why they tell people, take it easy, try not to agitate people, etc. They try to make people comfortable. That was the job as a chaplain, is to make sure we diminish agitations, including from loved ones being helpful and those kinds of things, But this is essentially what it's saying, is that we are releasing these agitations, depressed or excited thoughts. So that means one end of the spectrum and the other. That means this kind of, the waves are too big. So we make them smaller, we make them manageable. There are manageable waves in which if most people are not in a yacht. We're all in like an inflatable tube. And that just shows how easy, when it gets choppy, it's choppy and it's very dangerous and precarious. We're not in a huge boat that can take huge waves, emotionally in our life. You may think you can handle a lot, but little things drive us nuts, right? Little things really cause us to balance ourselves. Third is cultivation of cessation and contemplation in accordance with your situation. What's your situation there, Kensho? You got a situation? Wasn't there a wrestler called The Situation?
Probably.
I think
Yeah.
that was a Jersey Shore character.
Oh, okay. His name was The Situation.
Self-titled.
There you go.
Yeah. So what's your situation? Well, as we were just talking about, through correct discernment, we realize, wait a second, maybe things aren't going as well as they are. Maybe we've been covering for ourselves for a while, right? There has to be that unsatisfactoriness. And then 4, the cultivation of cessation and contemplation for controlling the minute thoughts within your concentrated meditation. So again, it's clearing the idea that even the little thoughts, the little agitations can become big. That's the amazing thing about the mind, is that a little thing can become big. We can blow it up so big. It's such an amazing power we have, right? A little annoyance, that little rock in your shoe just stops everything, right? That kind of thing. And the cultivation of cessation and contemplation to maintain an equal balance of concentrated meditation and wisdom. Again, with this word balance. So the keto I did today is to restore, that's with the blessing that I did, that is restoring balance. So the theme of Buddhism is that we have a natural balance that is Buddha nature, right? A natural, how do you say, equilibrium. That when we understand that equilibrium properly, we are able to live our life fully, right? But when we don't have the discernment to see what that natural equilibrium, it's like all of the natural, what do you call it? Natural laws, myoho, right, of the world. When we don't understand it, it becomes our peril, right? That idea. We are in some way living in ignorance. Therefore, the idea, I think the teaching that they taught about gravity is very important, right? So if you jump off something, you're going to fall, right? You can't fly, you know?
You can't?
No, see, Kane is not yet convinced. He thought you could fly. Well, it's okay. Try it, try it. No.
Nice.
So
Nice and stuff.
that's important to realize. Now, again, this goes into the idea of cessation, but I want to go into the maturity aspect of this, because again, this is very heavy stuff. But did anyone have any questions concerning those before we go on to the last part for spiritual maturity? You have any questions? Go ahead.
Just to reiterate, these are, as it said, so it says these are 5 senses that can be distinguished. So we're just distinguishing the different qualities of things that can manifest or are manifest in our okay.
In your dhyana concentration.
Yeah, because the word senses kind of confused me there for a second. But it's more like situations or environments, right? Okay.
So it's interesting. The Chinese character that they're using for senses is actually using all of our senses, which is actually all of the aggregates. The aggregates are the wholes that take in the information that go to our brain. And those are not necessarily, as they say, entering in. Those are good devices, but not foolproof devices. They have some cloudiness to them. It's like having cataract. They use it sometimes. It's like having cataracts in your eye, right? And I guess I've never had cataracts, but according to what it says, it becomes blurry, right? So then things you see, some people's cataracts are so bad that they can only see shades or something like that, until they have them removed. So it's like having a cataract in your eye. Kathy, did you have any question concerning that, or you understand? It's kind of complicated, but it's important, because the idea is to get more microscopic about this. That's how important it is. Okay. Yeah. But don't, as I said, don't conflate it that it becomes, oh, that's complicated. I don't want people to have that idea. You have the ability. That's why I'm sharing it with everyone. Everyone has the ability to come to these terms. You don't have to wear fancy clothes or be a Buddhist scholar or any of that. All you have to do is put that against the context of your life, and that's where Buddhism That's where the relevance of Buddhism is presented. I don't have to sell it to anyone. I don't have to explain it. I don't have to be the perfect example of it. All I need to do is cultivate and practice, and then with that, share with other people. That's why I don't need to pretend I'm something I'm not. Really. That's one thing of becoming your authentic self. In a sense that, yeah, I'm a loud mouth. That's why I call it the rowdy Buddhist, because we're joking. I'm a New Yorker, Well, Rhode Island might be a little, well, they're near Boston. You got the Boston accent there a little bit. Yeah, and I love Boston. I go to Boston quite a lot, so I love it there. And yeah,
Rowdy.
not as rowdy as I think New Yorkers were rowdy, and even Buffalo, we're even not even as great as New York. We're kind of, off on the west side. So spiritual maturity, I've been talking about during my morning meditation, but it's important that this is the ultimate question of what we need and the purpose of it. I believe that this adds to, as we were saying, the discernment, because the motivation to actually do this, the reason why both of you are here, which is good, because think about it. If if I sold this stuff for $2,000, there'd be like 20 million people here, that kind of thing. It's weird how that works. I don't do that, but yeah, a lot of people are intimidated to go that far. They don't want to know. Like as you said, I was thinking of that great Chili Pepper song. Once you know, you can't go back. He said, he was talking about his recovery. Um, there's a really real truth in that. That once you know, and there's a lot of people who just don't want to know. So consider yourselves very brave, either through your own decision or through life's decision that you end up here, to ask these questions. You're very brave people, all of you, and that's to be admired. That's very much to be respected. So I just wanted to tell you that, because this is not easy stuff. You could be off doing something else that might give you happiness in the moment, instead of listening and under trying to listen to reading, books from 1,000 years ago, but
Wouldn't have it any other way.
I know.
Thank you for being here. Likewise.
You're welcome. Because actually, that's when that awakens. I don't get tired of doing this. Lots of things I get tired of, but this I don't get tired of. Practice doesn't tire me out. Because that, I believe, is the spark that allows that we need to have. That is lit once you really realize it. That's why even my family knows what my priority is, because I even know as a parent, in order to be a good parent, by me just simply being a parent or expecting something from my children without me doing anything or showing an example, what can I do? How am I useful? Even to friends and loved ones. If I don't practice this way, I don't have anything, I really can't offer anything. And if I can within my practice, that's wonderful. I'm not assuming that I can, but if I can, then that's a meaningful life to me. Not just for myself, but living for others. That's why it talks about it. Usually death is the big moment where people then start to ask the questions. But what Buddhism is allowing you to do is not only prepare yourself for that moment, which will come to everyone, unless you have some magic power I don't know about, but or that it can help you in this day, because in many ways, death is the only, what is it? The death and taxes are the only
Two certain things.
two certain things, right? I hate to say that because I work for the treasury.
You don't even have to pay your taxes.
Yeah, well, that's
So
even
really,
optional for some people.
Sure, yeah.
That's optional for some people, it seems. The question carries along with it, what does it mean to become spiritually mature? Why do some people make strides while others do not? That's what we're talking about. Under what circumstances do we evolve spiritually? Will this be an inevitable result of living, or does something need to happen to us in order to become mature, psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually? And most of all, why is reaching spiritual maturity important in terms of our well-being? Okay. So again, one thing that I've learned is not to pretend. So therefore, I try to give my authentic self to people. And sometimes people like it and sometimes people don't. And I get it. You know, I'm from Buffalo. There's lots of, some people like the colors of Buffalo, which are the brightest colors. I like red, white, and blue. People paint their houses in it. Well, that's irritating to some people, maybe, but some people think it's beautiful, where that's what they wear every day of the week in Buffalo, which it's very fascinating. Um, yeah, it's important because again, I'd rather live authentically than live inauthentically, inauthentically,
Inauthentically.
and inauthentically, because that would be hiding something. I don't want to hide anything because I realize our secrets, our hiding keeps us ill. Whatever secrets we have make us ill. That is one thing is very true. But many of us think that of a personal happiness is the true measure of life. Of a life well lived, people think that. However, it has been suggested that what is most important for our health is that our lives are meaningful and not necessarily happy. There's a great show on Netflix. I know people have issues with Netflix. People were talking about it, but everyone was wanted to watch the shows on it. Was about they were looking around the world. There's a man who actually studies aging, and he was going around the world looking at the different cultures and what they had in common for the idea of people who aged well and perhaps had some insight to life and lived long, and why. It was interesting because it was all of these habits, and some of the habits were that people had the social engagement, right? Like they cared for each other, whether they were related or not, because they lived and survived. They required each other's existence to survive, right? Not because they had to, but because it's part of their function as a human being, whether they made this or that, and therefore that was incentive for people to get along. Um, the other one was walking up hills. Well, that's why maybe in Seattle is good, but high rate of cancer and other things here. But walking up hills, why? Because most people don't. They start to slow down. They don't try to do um, those challenging things. That's why, Kathy, you were sitting on the floor, right? For meditation. That's really important. That was another thing. People that weren't using furniture like that. That was in Okinawa and other places, where people had to walk up hills or they sat on the floor, etc. Where they had to use their body. Whereas being happy is about feeling good, is about feeling good. Meaning the meaning is derived from contributing to others in a bigger way. To be of service in the world is by definition meaningful work, but it may leave us and others feeling less than happy. So this is again with the reality check that if you believe, and we see this as children, I've taught my children many times not to create their idea for them, but allow them to see it with their own perspective. Because at any age, children are very discerning. That's what they're supposed to do. But parents will, in a way, thinking that they're protecting them, will give them answers that are not proper. I remember there was this great, I think this was in the 90s when more women's liberation was coming about. And there was a great commercial where, you had the dad and the little girl. And I have two girls. So, I love my girls. And actually, I guess for my wife, I'm easily spoiled and manipulated by them. But besides that, the dad is out there and the girl goes, Dad, why is the sky blue? And he gives the answer, sweetie, because of your eyes, or something like that. I couldn't remember. And then it was like, please don't talk stupid to your children. Even though it's cute, it's important that we allow children to learn. And sometimes, and I realized as a Buddhist, with children or adults or anything, it means getting out of the way, right? And that comes from one thing: personal discipline. The discipline is not about necessarily making myself what is considered a good person. It's making myself useful in the sense that I know I can discern when I get out of the way and allow people to have their own experience, right? You know, a lot of times people want to feel what the meaning is. When my daughter would ask, what is the meaning of such? In the Buddhism, as my teacher was taught, this is just my tradition, but you would have to give an answer, your answer first, before you could ask a question. You weren't going to be filled with Komoto Sensei is not the person to just go, Sensei, tell me what you think. You know, it's not going to work that way. You better be in it all the way. If you're going to go there, you have to be committed to whatever it is, and you better have a great commitment because he's going to test it. And if you don't have one, then you need to figure that out before you ask him a question. It was really great growing up with that, because most people are really ready to give you cool answers, right? Whether it's religion or anything in the world, everyone wants to give you answers. But Buddhism should give you more questions. And sometimes that's why people don't like Buddhism, right? Because they're like, I need more answers, more certainty, more, Sensei, tell me what it means, you know, tell me what it is. That's not what I'm here for. Because I'm just a simple practitioner like you. That's it. And we're on this path together. And it's in my best interest to help give you directions if I have them, give you whatever information I have in this kind of, how do you say, mission that we're on, right? Withholding information is not good for the team, I don't think, right? It's good to have information. So being a service to other people, even though we may not find it meaningful, right? Because we believe there's a social contract, and this is what I was saying with my girls and my family, is that when people are angry with me that there is this social contract, I said, what are you basing that social contract on? We base it on, of course, ego, and ego means my social contract is in my best interest, but it's really not, as we're seeing, you know, lots of social contracts have been created to be in people's best interest, and it's usually not the majority of people. If you've ever seen how it works. So therefore, happiness is not found in some state. Happiness is found in something, right? Some action, it seems like. Personal qualities of spiritual maturity may lead to experiences of well-being that are more reliable measures of spiritual health than happiness. So one of the cultivating aspects is that we move away from this idea of happiness. Because it's interesting, when I go into a situation, and you may ask yourself, when you do something, are you looking for happiness? What's your goal? What do you want out of it? Right? What is the social contract that you're creating? In our relationship, Kane, are you our social contract, I bring you happiness? You can answer, go ahead. If that was the case, you maybe don't have the
what is happiness? I mean,
me telling you wonderful, great, Kane, very good,
it's
best
not,
luck.
it's definitely not that. It's definitely
Okay.
not that. A relationship is not that.
Okay.
Neither should it be.
Neither
Neither do
should
I
it.
want it to be.
But did you think, is that something that you come through your practice, or did you believe that before, or was there a different way you believe things, or did you believe that your whole life, what you just said? Because that's pretty different than what most people think.
Well, I've had to really change my mind about that entire idea of what happiness is in my lifetime. I've definitely had to temper and change my thoughts on that.
And how did that affect, how did that work for you? Like, what was there a benefit? Was there not? What coming to that realization? What did it change for you, may have, or what did it alter?
What it altered was that I think, especially with something like happiness, words like that. I mean, it conjures up, and it has its connotations, and I think we attach ourselves onto whatever connotation we have with the happiness, and we think we convince ourselves that we have to be a particular way, and you know, and if we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, or we're not happy, or we're not fulfilled. And I think if we kind of sever those fetters that we're putting on ourselves and see it from approach that, you know, happiness is has a loaded connotation, and just to take life as it comes.
It's
It's
interesting
really
because
tough, but
very
but
good.
just to take life as it
Well, I
comes.
appreciate you explaining that. Yeah, no, I remember somebody asking me, "Don't you want happiness?" You know, and I said, "Ah, of course, nice things are nice, but does it mean I'll die or something like that?" And also contentment, there's happiness even in, and this is the good thing, as we see in the Buddhist mindset, when those bad things would happen, I would think of them as my treasure. And again, in most people's lives, you remember more of the unhappy things that you've overcome and dealt with than you did the happy things, right? Those are the things we remember. So maybe those are just as important, right? And maybe there's something in that. For those of us in the healthcare field, we may find ourselves simultaneously coping not only with our own private challenges, but also carrying the burden of other struggles and sadness as we pursue the goal of living a meaningful life. This can be overwhelming and depleting, and it requires that we take every opportunity to engage in self-nurturance. In order to keep ourselves physically and emotionally strong and spiritually fit, so that we can continue to help others without causing harm to ourselves. In our practice, what would you say is our spiritual self-care? What would you think that is? Go ahead.
Um, I mean, Abhyanga and would be one thing that I would say.
Abhyanga for Kathy, it means, do you know what it is with the idea of they do oil? It's an Indian practice to keep the body, they massage the oil and that sometimes to restore the body. Yeah, so it's a kind of self-care, restorative, and then the oil, it balances you. Again, it goes back to that balance of balancing one's, how do you say, arrangement of the five elements. So, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and meditation, of course.
Yeah. I think it all stems because even Abhyanga is an aspect of why we use that to quiet the body, to balance the body so that we can meditate, right? Because we said we can use those three factors of body, breath, well, prana, and mind to balance each other. That's very important. So the basis is dhyana meditation, dhyana. That is how we take care of ourselves. That's my self-care for sure. Because I know when I do my practice and when I know I don't. That's why I always do my practice. I don't miss it. Um, in order to keep ourselves physically and emotionally strong and spiritually fit so that we can continue to help others. The other is a core component of a healthy personal growth and developing a sustained capacity for our work or our practice is achieving spiritual maturity. So maintenance is very important. That's why in the spiritual practice, lots of people, and even I know teachers may encourage this, going all in. But actually, what I would say is this maintenance is what it's teaching us. A good teacher will teach you how to maintain a practice, teach you how to regulate a practice. That's really important. Not throw more practices on you. That's why this is very simple. Dhyana. Those approaching elderhood and adults with terminal illnesses at any age seem to have an opportunity to accelerate the spiritual maturity process. It has been suggested that the developmental task of advanced age can be viewed as a spiritual one. Yes, I believe that our nature is pushing us in that direction towards spiritual maturity, towards awakening. I think everything in our nature, that's why I know Buddha nature exists. Once we realize that, and that's one of with the idea of discernment, I feel our true nature is always pushing us towards it. But we have to awaken, we have to actualize that, and then naturally it propels us. So I don't have to necessarily fight with myself every day to do my practice anymore. I don't have to do that. And the reason why is because something happened, and I know when it happened. It happened where suddenly there was a propeller, how do you say it? Like a propeller on me that it just naturally took me. I didn't have to think. And even if I did think about something, like it came up in my mind, oh, why don't you take the day off? It wasn't interesting to me. I just didn't, I heard it, but I just didn't choose to follow it. And it wasn't anything of self-restraint or great discipline, because everyone, that's the one thing people always say, oh, you are so disciplined. Discipline is good. Discipline is not much. The discipline can get you to a certain point, but then everyone's got a breaking point that if we don't have it inherently in us, and that there's not this natural, as we said, bodhicitta aspiration, we couldn't sustain it. It's unsustainable. That's why we need practices that are sustainable, that are natural. That's why if a practice is not sustainable, a lot of the times is that it may not be the proper practice. A proper practice should be sustainable, and it should get to the point. It may be challenging, it takes time, but a good teacher, a good supporter of that, and a good sangha should help propel that, and that become a natural instinct. It's not me instilling in you why you should be a good practicing Buddhist at all, or why you should want to do this practice. That's not what I'm here. However, I can tell you that it's there. I can assure you that it's possible, for sure. Sure. No matter all of my personality or any of that stuff, even the lazy, all of that, I have that. The Buddha had that. But the idea was when we awaken this mind, we can naturally be instructed. Coping with a life-limiting illness can be compared to a normal aging process. Advanced illness may serve as a catalyst for spiritual growth as the person's life and time left to achieve development is truncated by the disease process. If we live long enough, we'll have to come to these questions. These questions will come up, and either we will have a insight into it. I'm not saying an answer. We will have insight into it and have a method that we can swim through it and navigate through it, or we won't. And being a chaplain, I get to see it all the time. I get to see people who have excelled in so many aspects of their life, but feel unfulfilled. And that at the moment of death, they're still left with the same question as anybody else. And that's a shame. That's what motivates me, is because I would like to see less people have that issue. Because at that moment, time is limited, capacity is limited, there's other things going on. It's not easy. It's not easy. I've seen it happen. People aspire and have that moment happen at the moment of death. But that's 1 out of a million. It's 1 out of a million. And that's all I've ever seen was that one. And everyone else that did not have that idea were stuck. And it makes me, and again, my empathy as a human being, not only because I will be there someday, but that it happened and they didn't have the opportunity. That to me encourages me, inspires me to be a chaplain. Because the more people that we can allow or inspire them to go deeper into this idea of spiritual maturity through dhyana, and that whatever capacity, I don't care what religion or place, I don't need to compare anything. But again, the result is all I care for. The result is all I care for. And patients with a life-threatening illness and the elderly will benefit from engaging consciously in the aging dying process and by embracing the occasion for learning and spiritual development. But that's not easy. But it behooves all of us, elders, the terminally ill, and even the young and healthy, to strive towards spiritual maturity, no matter what our current circumstances. That is where we have discernment. Yeah, you may have full use of your body now. Your mind, you may have good capacity of your mind. That may not be the case. And how many times you might avoid that, right? Or not believe that it will happen. But that doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean that it won't happen. The wisdom that arises out of deep working through these experiences may serve as protective factor against compassion fatigue. It has been suggested that accepting personal mortality is, in fact, the highest and most perfect way of living, far superior to living a life of constant and unconscious denial of mortality. Spiritual and psychological mature person must be prepared to shoulder a considerable load of anxiety as the layers of repression against mortality anxiety appear that are peeled away. So, as you practice, and sometimes the peels come off of the onion, there are things hidden there, such as anxiety and lots of things that we may shun from. But Buddhism says, don't accept them as it is, accept it as a treasure. Even the deepest, darkest aspect of your nature, accept as your nature, and there find enlightenment, because there lies the Buddha nature in all of those aspects. Okay. All right. So there's the end. So any questions or anything anyone like to discuss?
Is that document that you wrote, is that available for us to study?
This is not my writing. This is actually somebody I know. This is I can put it on by Reverend Melissa Stewart. She's a chaplain, and I thought it was
Okay.
a good point. So I could put the file on. I'm gonna put a group, so maybe I'll put the file on there. So
Well, I appreciate that, and I also appreciate your personal insight and sharing with that, especially
yeah,
our tradition around that. That I'm sure I'll have many, many, many questions later, but um, so many great points and things to think about. Um, I guess my question would be, how do you ever feel these kinds of fatigue still, even with a proper sustainable practice like compassion fatigue and anxiety? Or are you so well rehearsed at acceptance that these things maybe don't
you want to
make
hear
as
some,
much noise?
you want to hear
Yeah.
something interesting? This is why you could discern ego, like personal ego and spiritual practice. Okay, and you can know that they discern each other, right?
Mm.
Uh, it's interesting. Personally, it's lessened my personal life. My spiritual life, as far as being a minister, hence the reason why I practice as a practitioner, easy, no problem. But that's where I make a decision. That's again where it comes to the priority. Okay.
Right.
Personally, problem. But practitioner, no problem. So energies, as you were talking about fatigue, um, in compassion fatigue, right? Um, I do as a fireman as well, so I see lots of things also as a chaplain and everything else. Um, doesn't bother because I am appreciative. It's like the first of the six paramitas of Fusei. And it has a lot to do again with Nichiren Shonin's example of never despising Bodhisattva from chapter 20 of the Lotus Sutra. That when I see a suffering being, which is usually an exact image of myself, I feel as if it's a Buddha giving me something. So as a fireman, uh, helping people that have fallen or being in situations that other people aren't able to be in, right? And then having that residual where people have to go in the back and cry or do something like that. I don't have that problem. I believe that my spiritual process, unless I have some other issue, I don't know. But and it's not about being because I also was wondering, well, maybe it's a sociopathic. You don't have any empathy. If you don't have an empathy, you're a sociopath. But actually, I'm very empathetic. That actually, especially being a priest, that doing services for people that I may not even know, I feel extremely interconnected with those people, like as if they were my mother, my father, somebody very close to me, and feel that deep reverence and respect, um, even if I didn't know them while they were alive or have the opportunity, or helping them. Um, Actually, I look forward to those things. You know why? That's why I love being a fireman as well, specifically because um it I like seeing life in reality because I believe we create environments around ourselves that keep us from that. It doesn't mean you have to go running in a burning building to get the meaning of life or anything like that. I'm just saying this is my experience. Helping people because it's not always about running into buildings. A lot of times it's helping people pick them up that's fallen. With that, you can see illness, right? You can see aging, all the things where we become dependent on other people because we probably and again another thing of our encasing ourselves in our cocoon, we all think we're pretty independent right now. We may get by without thinking that we rely on other people and understand how much we do. But I like that always being present in my life, that I am indeed relying on them and they're relying on me. And that is where my, as you, if you could say anything close to contentment or happiness comes from. And it's in that experience. It's not in any reward. That's the reward itself, not in any kind of saying or just doing, and having the inspiration to do it. Yeah, that's like it's hard
Wow,
to.
thank you, Sensei. No, that's so human and so true. I'm finding as I get healthier and get through some of my personal things that I'm desiring more and more to utilize the practice to find those whatever natural things I have that can be of service to other people instead of spending all this time that I have spent just looking inwardly, for so long. And it's
all
just
of
like so needed and so necessary for the individual's health and other people's, spiritual health, I think.
is. I think one thing to make sure that I'm going to tell you is that all those things are still there. They haven't been cured because I believe that they're part of the human experience. They're part of whatever my physical makeup is, right? There are certain things in our life that, as we look at the way Buddhism is, it's not about removing parts of our body. It's about coming to a realization of them. Like, for instance, if we have a particular aspect of our character that is addictive, it's important to know that because then we can, of course, see it for what it is. And that's why some people, we're all addicts in that way. And to know that we have an addictive personality, however that comes about, is a great treasure to be able to have that freedom because not knowing that, and that's why ignorance is the base of all the problems, and not acknowledging that, like the 10 worlds, is actually a very desperate way to live. It's pure desperation, going from one set of thoughts and issues to another. All the issues are there because we're humans. Whatever my issues are, being a New Yorker, whatever my issues are, being from Buffalo, being whatever. People probably have lots of issues with me. That's I don't blame them, and I don't. It doesn't bother me, in the sense that those are not at the forefront. And then when I deal with that, when I focus on dhyana, when I focus on that, all of those other things come into perspective. And again, they're part of it, but yet they're not at the forefront. They're not, they're manageable as compared to unmanageable. And I think a lot of things in life, with Buddhism, that discernment makes things manageable. Because you're not gonna, these kinds of people that want to create another kind of cocoon where everyone around them, so they go to a spiritual community where everyone is blissed out all the time and everyone gets along and stuff like that. It's very hard to learn anything there. Very hard to learn anything. And that's just kind of that's like a heavenly, how do you say, living in the heavenly realm. I experienced that in the monastery. I believe that was a heavenly realm. And it can be a trap too. So I much rather prefer to live amongst the mud. And that's actually one thing I'm very happy about growing up in Buffalo. We got lots of mud in Buffalo. And I find beautiful people there. I find beautiful experiences. And when you don't have the judgment in that and you've heard it all and nothing surprises you because you, first of all, acknowledged it in yourself. You've acknowledged those aspects of your nature. Yeah, life's pretty cool and exciting. Every day I feel, and this is the big part of Buddhism that I would share with people. Every day I feel like, not that I'm like when we're making progress, not that I'm gaining something, but I'm realizing something because I know there's no such thing as gain or loss. We perceive that when we live in that gain and loss, that's a whole different game. But um, once we realize that we're making movement and a realization is that movement, that is pure fulfillment for me. I would say that's my happiness. That's my happiness. So that's why practice is not a chore for me. Um, no, neither is discussing the Dharma or trying to be honest with people that you know, I have to admit, when I became a monk, I wanted to be I didn't become a monk for nice reasons. So as I was talking about martial arts, the reason why I know about that is because I studied from 9. That was a huge part. It is part of my life. And people change it and behave and think it's something it's not. That's a problem. We do that with everything in our life. We say we sugarcoat something or say, and then again, we don't need to do that. And I'm sure as we get older, we sugarcoat less. And then we're like, oh, that's okay. It is what it is, right? And we can live with that. Whereas maybe when we're younger, we can't. But I wanted to be a superior human being by not only being physically powerful, but mentally powerful, because my hurt did not come from physical hurt. That was never a problem with me. My hurt came from emotional hurt. Very sensitive, perhaps. Very sensitive. And so the littlest thing would just make me feel so sad. And so, very contemplative. And it reminds me because, Shakyamuni talks about that they had the rice planting time period where the father goes to the festival and Siddhartha's watching the worm, the farmers digging up the worms, and then the bird comes and eats the worm, and then the hawk eats the bird, and then the human kills the bird, a hawk, that kind of perpetual idea of suffering, yeah, that was actually, I just didn't like that, but it was because I didn't understand it. And therefore I was bound by it. But in coming to terms with it, which as I said, manageable terms, when those things happen, I just know it's part of life, but I have an alternative because yeah, I can acknowledge it. And part of the strength is acknowledging it, like acknowledging you have a problem, right? That's a hard thing to do. Acknowledging that perhaps you have some unsavory traits as everybody else, and that you are not as perfect as your mother always says you are, right? Perhaps not. There was a great Seinfeld episode where they're like, the mom's like a typical Jewish mom. How can nobody like him? And the father's like, I can see why people might not like him. She's like, don't say that. That's like my mom. She wouldn't say it like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. Appreciate it. Great.
No,
Yeah.
it's always cool to just hang out, man. It's great. It's really enjoyable. Yeah.
For sure. For sure.
That's why I have your thing here. So when you can come, Kane will give you your Osajo Ofuda for your practice. So
Oh, beautiful. I appreciate that. Yeah. Can't wait. When I'm sure I don't have whatever I may have gotten or not gotten. I'll
well,
stay
thank
in
you
like
for
cocoon for now, I guess.
okay, that's all right. Yeah, just take care of yourself. Take care of yourself and make sure you're okay.
Yeah, well, all of you as well.
Thank you very
Oh,
much.
yes, thank you. Thank you guys for both joining us and participating in the retreat. It's really important for us to have that connection with you. So we definitely get a lot out of it. So, and keep in contact and keep joining us for the upcoming retreats. Hopefully we'll have one in the springtime or in the summer.
I'll have one with Kageyama Sensei in New York. So Kageyama Sensei is the yoga dhyana teacher from Nichiren Shu and Quito. So
Yeah,
he'll be
thank you so much, Sensei, and the other reverends, and all of your party there is it's just been so heartwarming and so full of wisdom. You really touched my life in the past few days, and I so appreciate you going into such detail, but still keeping it real enough for someone like me to still understand a lot of it and then be inspired to learn more as well. So thank you. Thank you all.
Maybe
Yeah,
we're
thank
more
you,
alike
David.
than you think. I'm pretty simple myself. So,
Thank you.
Because I think that the only way to excel in practicing is
Yeah.
to, be real about it. And that's a freedom in itself. And then to be okay with who you are and be where you're at. I remember one of the greatest teachings that I had from my teacher, Komodo Sensei, was, I was 18 years old. Um, I became a monk. I was so inspired. I read the entire library. I studied. I did every practice I could find. I was constantly being supported in a way that, oh, you're rebirth of this monk or something like that, and I remember, imagine 18 years old, you walk into a restaurant and they clear out the restaurant so you can sit down, never experienced like that. Just a kid from not even Buffalo. Buffalo is the big city near me, Niagara Wheatfield, right? So very tiny. um Experienced such a thing. And that actually, um when I met my teacher, Tsukamoto Sensei, and he said, I demanded that the master of the temple come out and I debate him, because I was very good at debating. So that was a skill that I picked up from my family, and maybe having some inherent ability. So that was my great thing, because again, I had the resolution that nobody had any special power or knew anything that I didn't, that I didn't have the capacity to know. So my observation and my challenge was always acceptable. And then I found out, of course, that's a great Buddhist way of doing it. And Nichiren Shonin was very good at it. So I went to Tsukamoto Sensei and I demanded to see the head priest. And he came in, and as a monk, Japanese priests can marry, and sometimes they have hair, and we used to laugh at them in the monastery because we didn't think they're real priests, because they had families. They didn't look the part. They always seemed like regular folk, call them business priests, right? So I thought, oh my goodness, I'm wasting my time talking to this guy, because he was out mowing the lawn, and he came in and put the robe like Kane has over his jeans and that, and sat down. And he goes, I start looking, and before I start talking, he goes, how old are you? And I go, I'm 21. I think I was 20 or 21 years old. And he goes, you look like you're 80. And I said, well, and he goes, are you a human or a ghost? And I said, a human being, of course. And he goes, no, 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 but you are so thin and pale. You're kind of like looks almost dead. And I said, well, I am pure vegan. And then also I eat once a day, and I sleep sitting up, and I do all of these things, right? And I limit myself to the food so that I don't cling to this and that. And he said, but you're a human being, right? Not a
Yeah.
ghost. I said, yeah. He goes, but you look like you're a ghost. And then also, you look like you're 80, but you're 20 years old. He said, your Buddhism seems some problem. Because it's not matching with the reality. And he said, you missed something. So I thought I had gained something, right? Through all of this practice and this power and stuff like that. And I thought I gained something. And he goes, no, no, you missed something. And I was like, I was so offended. Like, not offended and angry, because I was very confident in what I thought. So I wasn't offended, like, how dare you don't believe me? I didn't really care. But I was just so taken aback that actually, I think my only redeeming quality and again, that's why people, oh, you have more. No, one redeeming quality that I always think is that there is something inside of myself that will acknowledge truth, whether it's in my favor or not. That seeking mind, perhaps we would say, that just wants to seek no matter what it means, like losing everything. It's like maybe the person who can put everything on the line to do something. That's like me. So when I went there, I really went there to debate him and not to be superior, even though, of course, I was an egotistic 21-year-old with, that's been filled with all stuff. But deep down inside, luckily, I had that quality where I knew he was right. even though it irritated and agitated me. So I went back and I thought about it, and then I immediately went back and became his disciple the next day, and gave up being a monk and everything. And because then he made me go back to becoming a 18-year-old where I started and learning back up to 21. And then he would allow me to become his disciple when I was caught up. And he said, what do you learn at 18? You must learn 18, 19, 19. So all of our lives, living our life has a natural occurrence, timing, and that's essential as well. So, you know, when people say, oh, well, I just want to be proper for my age. I don't want to pretend that I'm 80 years old or 90 years old or the wise old man on the mountain or something like that. I'm just going to be myself at the age of 47. In Asia, actually, it's 48 because you add a year concerning your time in the womb. That's a year. So it's actually in Asia, you're a year older.
That's right.
But yeah, I think that's the important aspect, and that's the kind of practice that I do. So I mean, I'm not in it for any benefit, in the sense, but benefit of being liberated. That's it. So I really appreciate you coming, Kathy. It's really nice to meet new people and to get your insight and to see, because again, it's inspiring to see people take up the what is it, the mantle. You guys are brave, man. I just gotta tell you, you may not think so, but I'm gonna tell you, you guys are very brave in doing it, living your life. I mean, you would think that it would be natural for people to be brave to live their life. You guys too. I mean, it's not obviously not it's not necessary in the forefront of people's minds. So you guys are, how do you say, what do they call that? The trailblazers.
Yeah, trailblazers.
Trailblazers, yeah, of humanity. So it's a big thing. But again, don't think, oh, since he's up talking me. No, that's what it is. So it's a big responsibility. Now that you've done it, like that Red Hot Chili Peppers, once you know, you can't go back. So do with it what you want. Great. Thank you so much. Let us finish by chanting all Daimoku 3 times. Hey. Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you very much, everyone. Also, if you have time, I put on there, I do morning meditations on our YouTube channel, The Rowdy Buddhist. You're welcome to watch that. Also, there is a podcast that I make podcasts for people. It's free under Rowdy Buddhist Podcast. And then also there's a Patreon page that we'll be doing retreats and that for people. So all of the donations that we get, of course, take care of this temple and other places. So